We're so fortunate to have this practice, aren't we? So this is the third in a series of talks on jhana, or meditative absorption. Like all of the Buddha's teachings, it must be seen in the context of dependent origination and Four Noble Truths, and understanding the purpose and scope of the Buddha's Dhamma. And briefly, jhanas, I won't get into the whole explanation of each level of meditative absorption, but just to say that these four defined levels are in practicality undefined, meaning that we simply move from an initial phase or level of concentration through these other levels. But in order to have a conversation about it, then it needs to be a certain amount of definition. At least I think this is why the Buddha explained it this way. So briefly, the first level, and these levels of jhana also relate rather directly to the four foundations of mindfulness. So the first jhana, which we all enter when we begin meditation, is simply the joy that's born of, the word that's often used is rapture or enraptured. And it's kind of an antiquated word, and it has connotations of the second coming and all of that. But even that is a useful way of understanding. If you think of the second coming being enraptured with this incredibly wonderful event, if you'll put it that way, and you're simply enraptured or enthralled with it. Using the word rapture in this sense is kind of the same thing. It might be a little bit too extreme, but we become enraptured with just the seclusion born of that initial phase of meditation. We leave the world behind and we go sit on our cushion. That's the first level, and we become mindful of the breath. The second level is rapture or joyful engagement with concentration, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. Directed thought simply means that we are still maintaining our intention to meditate and to be mindful of thoughts arising and passing away and coming back to our breath. And that evaluation is valuing what's occurring in our minds. We either see it as pleasant or unpleasant. We are still engaged in evaluating what's occurring in our minds. And also, in a subtle way, and the sutta gets a little bit more into this, evaluating whether we're doing it right or whether we're having the right experience, etc. And all of that is just a distraction, but a recognized part of the second level of meditative absorption. The third level is simply becoming enraptured or having a joyful engagement with a developing mind of equanimity, which is another way of saying a deeper level of concentration, and with the fading of directed thought and evaluation, meaning for that moment in meditation, we're no longer thinking about anything else, and we're simply mindful of our breath. And we could say that it's lasting for a moment or two. Our concentration is deepening. And the fourth level of jhana is simply a mind that is resting in equanimity, free of any directed thought or evaluation. And this is so important because often the jhanas are taught, especially in modern Buddhism, as something that is only attainable by very advanced meditators on the brink of awakening. The Buddha described that fourth level of jhana as a peaceful abiding. And I would bet every one of us has had that peaceful abiding in our meditation, even if it was just briefly. So these four levels of meditative absorption are to be recognized and then cultivated. And obviously we can't cultivate something unless we first recognize it. So even that first jhana, that first level, taking joy in the simple seclusion as we begin our meditation practice, I would bet that has deepened for each and every one of you too, hasn't it? And maybe even at first you weren't all that joyful about the seclusion. But now as we start seeing the benefits and start cultivating these deeper levels of concentration, simply by our mindful recognition of them and being aware of them, we're able to cultivate them fuller. And that's really the point of all these different teachings of jhana. And as we go through this series, you'll see how the Buddha addresses these different levels in a situational way, but with a slightly different view. And this is called the Jambali Sutta, or the wastewater pool. The Buddha addresses those gathered. Friends, there are four types of Dhamma practitioners. There is a type of Dhamma practitioner that enters and remains in mental absorption, or the jhanas, and experiences a certain peaceful awareness release. Another way for saying calm. They are mindful of the cessation of self-identification. But even as they are mindful of the cessation of self-identification, their mind is not enraptured with release or with cessation. They do not grow confident or steadfast or well established in the cessation of self-identification. For them, the final cessation of self-identification cannot be expected. So the Buddha is not making a prediction that if you're in this state, forget it, you might as well stop. He's just simply saying that if you stay in that state, you can't expect awakening. But this is a common state that we all talk about, and it's often experienced as a fear of annihilation or simply doubt that you're doing the right thing. It's just a distracted state within your meditation practice that arises for each and every one of us. Another way of saying it is it's when a hindrance arises, one of the 5 hindrances arises during meditation. Unless you continue, you can't expect to awaken. If you let these impermanent states derail your meditation practice, of course you can't awaken because you're not continuing. The Buddha continues. Just as if one were to grasp a branch with hands sticky with rosin, they would cling to the branch. In the same manner, one who remains in mental absorption and experiences a certain peaceful awareness release, but continues to cling to wrong views, there's the metaphor, stuck on a branch, and is not enraptured with release, with cessation, they do not grow confident or steadfast or well established in the cessation of self-identification. For them, the final cessation of self-identification cannot be expected. So any distraction or doubt that arises during our meditation practice is ultimately due to clinging to wrong views, clinging to views ignorant of Four Noble Truths that in the moment we're not willing to let go of. Again, these aren't definite and structured levels. They're just to be mindful of it, that when we're in it. Why? Because when we recognize that we're in it and understand that this is something that the Buddha taught even during his time, we know that the way to get through it is to simply continue with Dhamma practice. Frank?
I'm going to comment on the practice of Shamatha-Vipassana meditation with appropriate mindfulness. It kind of gradually moves from conceptual understanding to experiential understanding, and then So you move from not knowing to knowing, and then the mindfulness practice is guided by right view, and your concentration is deepening. So I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the levels of jhanas.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for bringing that up. And that's what the Buddha is referring to here. Again, he's not saying that if you're here, you're no good, forget your Dhamma practice. He's just simply describing the experiences that, again, this sutta is not instructions on how to cultivate Dhamma as much as a description of what occurs during a Dhamma practice in relation to jhana. I think on Saturday or Tuesday and Monday, and I don't think it might even be both days, I'll give a talk on the Samdanga Sutta, which is really an analysis of the jhanas. It becomes a little bit more clear, but that's right. And from this singular method, the Buddha taught one meditation method for his entire life, Shamatha-Vipassana meditation. And going back to last Thursday, he taught that Shamatha, tranquility or calming the mind, and Vipassana, insight, must be done in tandem. In other words, it's part of one singular meditation practice, all rooted in developing right view and all framed by the Eightfold Path. So this is just a description of how that's done and how to recognize it. Yes?
I took that first opening where you just read as the sensation of identification.
Self-identification, yeah.
Self-identification. Because when I'm meditating, when I think about my breath, I also self-identify within my breath, which I know is not correct.
Well, but not to interrupt you, but it's not, it shouldn't even be looked at as correct or not correct, except as a deepening level of meditative absorption. So there's that initial phase where there is some self-identification,
right.
directed thought.
But I'm holding on to my thoughts of myself in my breathing, which is not correct. That's right. And I think, well, maybe that's what I understood you just read, that you, within your own breath, feeling your own chest rising and falling, or your breath, and however you think about it, I can easily fall into the pattern of identifying with that as myself.
Yes, and that can be seen as the first level of jhana, isn't it? Because you have first established seclusion and started your meditation practice, but then there's this little Lorna on your shoulder saying, "Oh, you're breathing." Well, again, it's not correct or incorrect. It's simply, as the Buddha is saying, it simply is, and it's to be recognized as something that needs to be developed further. If not, then you're not going to go anywhere. But that's all it is. So again, even that idea of in the first, and you really described it beautifully, in the first and second jhana, there is directed thought and evaluation, which is what Lorna just described. You're evaluating what you're doing. And as your practice deepens, as your jhana deepens, that falls away. And I would bet that you have had experiences where that did fall away.
Yes.
And I bet you all did. Again, one of the reasons why I'm teaching this is to bring another level. I know that at least I hope I don't mystify meditation, but to even demystify it even further. What's occurring during meditation is entirely practical, and it can always be mindfully observed. In fact, it should be.
So when there's not the resin, you're not self-identifying.
Yes, when you're not clinging to wrong views, when you're not hanging onto the branch of wrong views. And you'll see that the Buddha uses that same metaphor with hands that aren't sticky with resin. Describes that. And again, if you look at what David just brought up, what I just said, in meditation, Shamatha-Vipassana meditation is not something that is done as a standalone practice and then we do other things as part of the Eightfold Path. Everything relates to recognizing and abandoning ignorance of Four Noble Truths and the wrong views that arise. And this first level, and wrong views are characterized, aren't they, by constant self-identification or self-referential views. So in the first level of meditative absorption, and even in the second, there are remnants of that self-identification. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's not correct or incorrect. In fact, it's to be recognized that this is simply where I am. And continue. And what happens in the third jhana, the third level of meditative absorption? The mind calms even deeper, and there's fading of directed thought and evaluation. And finally, we get to that place where I bet every one of us has experienced, at least occasionally during our practice, of a pleasant abiding. And I bet you every one of us has taken that pleasant abiding off our cushion and brought it into our mundane lives, at least for occasional moments, and we recognize it too. And I think every one of us in this class has said that they found themselves in situations that were in the past stressful, and they had this peaceful abiding. That's what the Buddha's talking about. You brought that fourth level of jhana off your cushion and into your moment by moment life. The Buddha continues. Then there is a type of Dhamma practitioner that enters and remains in mental absorption and experiences a certain peaceful awareness release. They are mindful of the cessation of self-identification. As they are mindful of the cessation of self-identification, their mind is enraptured with release, with cessation. They do grow confident and steadfast and well established in the cessation of self-identification. For them, the final cessation of self-identification is to be expected. Pretty powerful statement there, isn't it? But it's also very simple and direct. And I bet every one of us has had that feeling of the cessation of self-identification, even if it's fleeting. the reason why the Buddha is teaching the jhanas, and I'm teaching it now, is to recognize it. And when you recognize it, you can cultivate it. So we've just talked about two types of Dhamma practitioners. There's the one that gets distracted by these views, and the one that isn't, that understands the whole process and continues. Well, you could say that this second type of Dhamma practitioner was the first type of Dhamma practitioner, but they simply continued. They continued their practice. And this is the development of that. Is that clear? Now the Buddha uses that metaphor again. Just as if one were to grasp a branch with clean hands, they would not cling to the branch. In this same manner, one who engages fully with the Eightfold Path remains in mental absorption and experiences a certain peaceful awareness release, and they continue to diminish wrong views. Their mind is enraptured with release and with cessation. They do grow confident and steadfast and well established in the cessation of self-identification. For them, the final cessation of self-identification can be expected. Excuse me. So notice in this sutta that the first type of Dhamma practitioner, the Buddha didn't make reference of having fully integrated the Eightfold Path, did he? That's what was lacking in that first type of Dhamma practitioner. And as all of us know, that's something that takes place over time for most of us. We don't decide we're going to become Dhamma practitioners and we immediately have integrated the Eightfold Path as part of our Dhamma practice. But if we're stuck in that first description, we know that there's still some more work to do. What is it? Integrate the Eightfold Path. And as we integrate the Eightfold Path as part of our jhana practice, let me qualify what I just said. When the Buddha would give direction to go and meditate, he would say, go find the root of a tree or an empty hut and do jhana, meaning do this practice of ever deepening meditative absorption. Now, of course, we can't do that without the proper framework to do it. And here the Buddha is alluding to that. Is that clear? The Buddha continues. Then there is a type of Dhamma practitioner that enters and remains in mental absorption and experiences a certain peaceful awareness release. They are mindful of breaching ignorance of Four Noble Truths, but their minds are not enraptured with release, with cessation. They do not grow confident or steadfast or well established in the cessation of self-identification. For them, the final cessation of self-identification cannot be expected. Those of us that were just on retreat will probably remember this a little easier than others that weren't. But in the 7 factors of awakening, one of those factors is joyful engagement with the Dhamma, isn't it? Do you all remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And that's such an important part of the Dhamma. Rather than taking to the Dhamma as something, and this can easily happen from those of us that might engage in the Dhamma to fix a broken self or to escape the awful situations of the world, rather than a joyful engagement with the Dhamma because we have taken true refuge, meaning we understand that a human being did just this, he taught us his Dhamma, and we are fortunate to have a well-focused sangha to continue to cultivate these. So a joyful engagement with the Dhamma. If we're approaching the recognition of our own ignorance, wrong views, from kind of a grudging acceptance of, I'm going to do this Dhamma practice, the Buddha's saying you got to change that point of view because you'll never get there. You're going to be stuck in that. You must become enraptured or enthused. The Latin word enthos, inspired, enthused by your own practice. And that's something that any of us can cultivate from understanding where it's going to take us. Complete and total release from wrong views, a life of lasting peace and happiness. But if we don't have that, recognize it and cultivate it. Frank, did you have your hand up?
I did. I was just going to say again, I see it as a gradual progression of staying in the process of cultivating all the factors of the Eightfold Path. As your understanding increases and the mind calms and the insight grows and concentration develops, it does turn into a joyful engagement. At first, it might not be that. It's more like, I think everybody comes to the Dhamma At least I did, because of the pain and suffering in my life, and I wanted freedom from it.
Yep.
And I realized through coming here that it's a lot of work. You know, but once you enter the stream, I heard that, like, entering the stream, there's like no turning back. You know, it's like, I don't know, it becomes joyful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't mean to allude that if you came to Dhamma practice to fix a broken self, et cetera, that's the wrong motivation. It's just at some point you have to realize that that's just a continued propagation of wrong views, that I'm always fixing a broken self. But yeah, most of us would come to Dhamma practice because we feel in some way there's something lacking in us, or there's something that we need to adjust in our way. Mary.
I was also interpreting it as a little bit of a self-check, meaning as you progress and have some of these direct experiences, I know I've had experiences where you feel like either your practice is being validated, or I don't know, maybe different outcomes are occurring in your life and you feel you're giving credit to your practice because things are turning out maybe differently, or people responding to you differently, or whatever. But then you can get comfortable in that place as well and feel like, okay, I'm doing pretty good here, right? Yep. And so I almost took some of that out of this, that it's a little bit of a self-check and an accountability to keep going further. That I would imagine if you ever felt sort of stuck, or maybe you didn't even think of yourself as stuck, but you feel a sense of gratification because maybe enough things have changed in your life, or maybe your outlook has changed to a certain degree, or your relationships have changed to a certain degree. You could kind of rest on your laurel a little bit, and not so much from like an eye making, although I would imagine there's a little bit of that in there, but just a satisfaction. You can even think of that as joyful engagement. But what I took from the whole sutta was, like we've heard before, that there is still more work to be done, right? Yeah. That if you just stay there, awakening may not occur for you because you're not looking for it, because you're satisfied in these things that are happening. And so I took it also as a gentle nudge and prodding to not rest there and to keep moving forward, that there's more work to be done.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. What a great insight into that. And you can see that the Buddha's saying, watch out for just what you described there, that we can take a certain level of achievement as, okay, that's good. That feels pretty good. I'm better off than I was, and stop there and lose the goal of final awakening. And these are all situational teachings that the Buddha recognized occurring in the original Sangha too. It's just as common back then. That was great insight.
And if the foundation isn't right view, then you're just self-identifying with how you're improving versus.
Yeah. You're giving yourself too many pats on the back.
Right.
And again, the practical nature of this and all the other Buddhas, the suttas, but in particular this one, is a Buddhist really teaching this is what can happen. Watch out for it, like Mary just said, and continue, because if you don't, the final outcome isn't assured. Right. But then he'll describe how you know. This is where the title comes from, or the subtitle. Just as if there were a long-standing wastewater pool, and during the dry season, a man blocks the inlets and opens all the outlets. With inlets blocked and no rain falling, the breaching of the wastewater pool would not be expected. In the same manner, a Dhamma practitioner enters and remains in mental absorption and experiences a certain peaceful awareness release. They are now attending to the breaching of ignorance, but they do not grow confident or steadfast or well established in the breaching of ignorance. For them, the breaching of ignorance cannot be expected. And it's also a very fine direction to what's the point of all this? Recognizing and abandoning ignorance of Four Noble Truths. that the metaphor of blocking the inlets and opening all the outlets is metaphor, isn't it, for not one of the factors of the 7 factors of awakening is investigating the Dhamma, not investigating the Dhamma. Simply opening yourself, as some meditation practices are, just develop this meditation practice with this constantly open mind, but you're not learning anything. There's nothing coming in. And so the breaching of ignorance can't be expected by simply a meditation practice, especially if it's not devoted to concentration or other, and it's devoted towards other things, other experiences. Then there is a type of Dhamma practitioner that enters and remains in mental absorption and experiences a breaching of ignorance. For them, the breaching of ignorance, missed the line. Sorry. Then there is a type of Dhamma practitioner that enters and remains in mental absorption and experiences a certain peaceful awareness release. They are mindful of breaching ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Their minds are enraptured with release from ignorance. They do grow confident and steadfast and well established in the breaching of ignorance. For them, the final cessation of self-identification can be expected. Again, using ever deepening concentration for the purpose it's intended, for recognizing and abandoning ignorance. And how do we do that? Again, it's not just through meditation, but meditation is singularly important in using the rest of the Eightfold Path, defining the refined mindfulness that can hold in mind the Eightfold Path, to eventually breach all of ignorance. To now be, as the words that Buddha would use, is now there's nothing left to provoke moments rooted in ignorance. The Buddha continues, just as if there were a long-standing wastewater pool during the rainy season, and a man opens all the inlets and blocks all the outlets. With inlets open, outlets closed, and rain falling, the breaching of the wastewater pool can be expected. In other words, the water would get to a certain point and it would overflow its banks. In the same manner, a Dhamma practitioner enters and remains in mental absorption and experiences a certain peaceful awareness release. They are mindful of breaching ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Their minds are enraptured with release from ignorance. They do grow confident and steadfast and well established in the breaching of ignorance. For them, the final cessation of self-identification can be expected. What the Buddha is saying here is that you have deepened your concentration to the point where you can now hold in mind the whole purpose of Dhamma practice, the recognition and the abandonment of ignorance. But it takes a certain level of concentration to be able to hold that in mind to an acceptable extent that it actually has an effect on your overall Dhamma practice. Again, the ever-deepening levels of meditative absorption. We go through each and every one of these levels, at least the first 3, every time we meditate, even in the beginning stages of meditation. I would bet. I'm not making a declarative statement, but that's pretty close to what happens to anybody who engages in this meditation practice. That 4th level of establishing a peaceful abiding might take a little bit. But when we're using a proper meditation method, Shamatha-Vipassana meditation, and cultivating these deepening levels of jhana, very quickly we get to the point where these ever deepening levels of jhana, of meditative absorption, can now support the refined mindfulness of the entire Eightfold Path, and so lead to the cessation of ignorance and the cessation of suffering. Is that clear? Is that an adequate summary for what we've talked about so far?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the feedback. The Buddha continues. These are the 4 types of Dhamma practitioners in the world. And then the question, that's the end of the sutta. So the end of the question I would have is, which type are you going to be? Very second. Or are you going to be the 4th? It's a silly question. But it's a question that we should continually ask ourselves with as little self-reference as possible, just to recognize where we are in our Dhamma practice. Are we that first type that gets distracted? or are we the second, third, or fourth type that finally has engaged wholeheartedly with a meditation practice and is investigating the Dhamma to bring the cessation of ignorance to its conclusion? Thank you for listening to me tonight. Any questions on this sutta? Are there any questions as to why I'm teaching these? Seriously. Because I've thought about that, and actually I've put this series off for a little while, kind of just getting a feel for what y'all are ready for. And okay, I'm not looking for you to satisfy me by saying, "Oh, how wonderful this teaching is," but just that you're finding it useful. So we'll go around the room, and I'll find that out right now. Ron, good to see you.
Yeah, to that last point, I'm really glad you're teaching it, because there's a fair amount of struggle in me still on meditation practice. And I was just thinking back of years ago when I actually started my daily practice, that I recognized that I was really lacking in actual concentration, that I could, grasp a couple of things, but it was just kind of fleeting by me. And I'm seeing now that I've gotten, fairly, I've gotten along in that, but there's still ways to go, and it is still in deepening concentration.
Yeah.
Because I noticed as I'm reading more, that the ability to hold in mind more factors of the Eightfold Path, as I live my life, there's work to be done there. Not that it's, I haven't gotten somewhere, but there's work to be done.
Yeah. It beautifully said, and even that recognition that there's work to be done is so important, paramount, and it's what the Buddha is referring to here. As I started this talk tonight, describing the levels of jhana, it's pretty simple. I got a comment on one of my YouTube videos from someone. He said, basically, you just make this way too complicated. And I don't know if we'll ever listen to another one. I don't remember what sutta that was on. And I take those seriously. I don't just dismiss it. I don't want anybody to come to the Buddha's Dhamma and think that I'm presenting it in too complicated a way. And I think I do the best I can, like anybody does. But what I thought about was that the Buddha's Dhamma is utterly simple, but it's so broad in its application. In other words, it engages every aspect of a human's life and a human psyche, that in describing it, it said the Buddha gave 84,000 suttas, all on the same subject, basically, but always situational. And he saw a need to explain something in a certain way, even the jhanas. And this is what he did. This is a recollection of a sutta he gave 2,600 years ago. So the subject matter is very simple, isn't it? But the application, because of the way a mind rooted in ignorance will continue to ignore its own ignorance, all the strategies that it will come up with, that's what creates these complicated scenarios. And that's what must be addressed, just as Ram just described. There's work to be done. It's not just, okay, I'm going to meditate for a couple of days, I'm going to memorize the Eightfold Path, and I'm awakened. We have to apply it to this mind that is rooted in its own ignorance. How do we address it? And this simple teaching on recognizing the ever-deepening levels of concentration is, I think I prefaced this in the introduction, it's not meant to be instruction for how to meditate. It's a description of how to recognize that your practice is bearing fruit. You're going through these different situations. Thank you, Ron. Lorna.
Well, I just echo what Ron just said, really, that he just so put it so perfectly, that there's work to be done, and recognizing where we are, and I just thought he just said it so perfectly, so I'll just go along with what he said.
Thank you. Does everybody else go along with Ram? So we're done for tonight?
What he said.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Thank you, Lorna. Thank you, Ram. Matt, good to see you tonight.
John, good to see you. Really, what I just wanted to say is that, well, one, it's really special to have this sangha to go over these teachings and to deepen our practice together. And two, I think that this series of talks on jhana is perfect for, the retreats that we did in the spring and in the fall, going into the Satipatthana Sutta, going into the Anapanasati Sutta, looking at divine origination, looking at the Four Noble Truths, looking at the Eightfold Path. And then this is sort of the next layer. This is the next detail that we as a sangha can integrate together. So I think it's well timed, and some of us, all of us in this room, went to the spring retreat, and most of us here went to this fall retreat. So we're in, and if not, we heard the suttas here in class. So we're familiar with that foundation. So I think this is a well-timed teaching and important, and I'm really grateful to be here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Matt. You really got me thinking. I hope this doesn't sound self-aggrandizing, because I certainly don't mean it that way. It's really because of how far the sangha has developed. The amount of authentic Dhamma that is taught in this room is really remarkable. And it, as the Buddha says in the Anapanasati Sutta, this is something that's rare in the world. I don't know that there's any sangha that engages with the Dhamma this deeply, on a weekly and sometimes bi-weekly way. It is remarkable. So thank you all for that. David, good to see you.
I think on Saturday I almost challenged you to be more strict.
Oh, yeah, you did.
And here you are with this teaching, and that's what that is.
So be careful
Be
with.
careful. Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
The answers are all right there, and plus there it is. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the suggestion. I hope the stick isn't too heavy, but it really is that. From the first day I started teaching, I always am looking at who I'm teaching, and it goes back to what I just said too. It's remarkable how you all have integrated this. This is, like I say, it's heady stuff, but it takes, as Frank said, it takes a lot of effort. And you do it, you engage in it, So yeah. Again, it's sometimes it just the rarity of what's occurring strikes me, and tonight's one of those nights where it's really striking me. Helen, good to see you. We've missed you for a couple of weeks.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be back. I think this lesson just points out the discrete difference, this understanding this discrete levels, discrete differences in how you behave and speak and put effort into things. It's never assuming. It's always looking deeper. Is there something more? Is there something more?
Yeah.
And Yeah, I remember years ago hearing a radio program, a guy talking about his meditation practice, and he remembers the day where he was like, I got it, I felt it, I was there. And he calls his teacher and he tells his teacher, I found it, I was there. And his teacher was like, no.
That's right.
That's not it.
Yeah.
And so it's those, it's the details, the discrete layers of it all.
Yeah.
That each time you can just apply another layer and gain more depth.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you for that insight, Helen. That was great. This is an underlying theme of the Buddhist teachings, noticing the discreteness, noticing it's this and it's not that. Noticing your progression is so important. And if it wasn't, the Buddha would just have taught, go someplace and go meditate, and eventually you're going to be good to go. But if there's no framework for recognizing the views that you're bringing into your meditation, all you're doing is increasing these concepts that got us in trouble in the first place, aren't you? It might feel good. It might become a familiar activity, and you might even get recognition from some of your associates. But unless you're recognizing the discreteness of your Dhamma practice and how to apply it discreetly, you're not going to go anywhere with it. And thank you for recognizing that. Kevin, good to see you.
Nice to be here, Joe. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking.
Really appreciate this series of talks after retreat, and speaking to what Ram said, there is sort of an encouragement, or what we heard Sutta, that initially when you start this practice and understand the breadth and the depth of the Four Noble Truths and the ignorance that we've developed, sort of a rough jewel, and it's a jewel, but it's cracked open, in a raw form. And this sort of, for the work aspect, is how we're able to sort of increase that and visibility, and then the light of wisdom provides extra clarity to this. It's shining that jewel, for lack of a better. It's still there, and you need to keep working at that. It's really nice that the Buddha uses the metaphor of water, because that's a rising, passing away natural phenomenon, or feature of the natural world. So
Yeah.
these four states, go through them. It's nice to hear that be taught. So.
Yeah, thank you. I like that metaphor too, of polishing the jewel. That's just what we're doing. Yeah. Good to see you. Mary, good to see you tonight. How are you?
Good to be here. I figured you were teaching this because as a teacher, you're seeing great progress. And you have shared with us that you are anxious to, see us make even further progress.
That's what we do.
So
I'm
when
clinging to that, craving
when I
for it and
read
clinging
this,
to
I
it.
thought, okay, just no prodding there, moving along. But this is an example of another very practical, notice the nuances of your practice, go deeper, re-up with your effort, the quality of your time on the cushion. And really what Ram said, that the deepening of the concentration and the quality of that time allows you to access the Eightfold Path in greater speed, or not really speed, but ease of access and readiness as you're dealing with the phenomenal world.
Yeah.
And a sutta like this is kind of speaking to that. Is you may have checked off certain boxes, but there is more here. And this is not where you were meant to rest, you're meant to go further.
Yeah.
And that's a great message, that's a great, I can do that, right? I can pick up my stuff and keep going.
Yeah.
And I can do that, so it's very inspiring, and I appreciate hearing everybody else's thoughts on it as well, so thank you.
Thank you, Mary. The almost all of these suttas in this series, as I'm preparing them to teach, there's this underlying theme of, I can see the Buddha 2,600 years ago using these teachings to inspire and encourage his students. And you just, I don't, whenever I say this, it sounds like I'm establishing myself as another Buddha. I'm not. But I hope to be doing the same thing. And I think I am. Why? Because I'm using the Buddha's words. It's not something that I came up with. But think about just that profound nature of this, the incredible humility that this man had to spend the last 45 years of his life, almost moment by moment, inspiring and encouraging others to wake up. And you can see that in every sutta too, and especially these. Wait till you hear the Sama-samdanga Sutta. I mean, it's all about that. That'll be Saturday. I think I will teach that Saturday and Tuesday because it's such an important sutta, so everybody gets a chance. But we'll see how it goes. Thank you, Mary. Bonnie, good to see you tonight. How are you?
Okay. I hear people talking about like applying the layers, but for me, it seems like it's sort of opposite. So as I row further up the river and keep rowing, it's like the layers peel away.
Mm.
And so the things that interfere or obscure or distract. So it's it's like an onion, you peel away and you peel away. And I don't think though for me that there's ever I think there's always gonna be another layer. And, I don't know that I think maybe I experience a glimpse of some of them, and sometimes I'm in this one more in terms of the jhanas that you talk about in those steps or layers of those. But I just feel I just have to keep growing.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that metaphor too. I got a question a while ago that put me back on my heels. I think I shared it here that an online student said, "Why did the Buddha keep meditating after he awakened?" But why wouldn't he? There is, even to an awakened mind, there's ever deepening levels of pleasant abiding, isn't there?
Well, there's like this one state, it provides this sort of relief from having to actively do something besides the breath, right? So it's like kind of this balance between relief and the stress and applying and working to apply the Eightfold Path, that framework, using it to manage and work out how I'm going to react differently to the stressors. So, it's sort of what it feels like for me. It's relief and then the work, and then sometimes the meditation is work because maybe it's a little harder because of what's going on here. So it's like this. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. You're describing developing a calm mind so that you can take that calm mind into the rest of the Dhamma and engage with it and bring it off your cushion. Thank you. Liz, good to see you tonight.
Good to see you too. I think I'll speak for myself, but I always have a curiosity to know more, and so going further and further into how the Buddha was processing and thinking about all this always amazes me. That someone actually had the mind that could work out all these details.
Yeah,
Now,
it's remarkable.
I'm trying to work out a recipe in my head. And he's managing, kinds of
Life.
things.
Life in general.
Yeah,
Life in general,
at the most subtle levels.
how to live a better, a recipe for a better life. Yeah, so it always amazes me. But I also love the idea of the nuances of things, and even looking at what's happening in the world today. It's not without context.
Yep.
Things aren't happening in a vacuum. There's context and history, and I find sometimes in talking about it, there are a lot of people that aren't interested in the nuances, and they're much more black and white. And so I think this kind of feeds that whole part of me that wants to know a little bit more what is underneath that next leaf. So it's always good to hear things in a new way. It's, as Bonnie would say, it's same pants, different pocket, but you hear it differently, and you process it a little differently every time you hear it told a different way. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that, same pants, different pockets. That's what all these different teachings on jhana are too. They're the same pants, but we're coming at it with different pockets. And that what you were talking about, the subtleties of the Buddha's understanding. I couldn't imagine if I had a practice for a zillion years if I could come up with these understandings that he did upon his awakening. But then I think as he taught, Kevin pointed this out too on retreat, as he continued to teach and continued to be inspired by his own teaching and the people he was teaching to, I think he was able to really develop his soul understandings to ever deepening levels in his own mind too. In the application of it.
Also, in
That's just speculation,
yeah,
but
teaching so many of his monks and seeing the resistances that came up from there. That's we find his teaching as well.
Me
Not
too.
just that the expanding Naya, but just his teaching method was like, oh, they're doing that when I tell them that. Oh, I'm going to change that.
No, probably the second, maybe I should say the third most fortunate aspect of my life is having the ability and the venue to teach, because I've learned things about the application of the Dhamma that I never could have learned if I wasn't sitting here and having it's beyond privilege to teach you folks, all of you.
There's no better way to learn than to teach.
Yeah, there really isn't. And not that I did follow the Course in Miracles for a while, but there's a line in the manual for teachers in the Course in Miracles is that a teacher-student relationship is maximal, meaning you both get just as much out of it as each other. That makes sense? And that really is true. And I think that, again, speculation, that's how the Buddha experienced his teaching career too. Thank you. Frank, good to see you tonight. I know you guys like to get out of here by 8:30. I hope you got time to tell us what you think, though.
Like what everybody shared, I have a lot of connections with it. I appreciate new teachings always. I certainly like the suttas that have metaphors or analogies in them, or similes or whatever, comparisons, because I learn better that way. He's a great storyteller, and I can really appreciate that. So I had connections with the dirty hand, with the branch, and the mind that clings to the self-identification.
Yeah.
Then the next one was from integrating the eightfold path. And as the mind becomes clear, the clean hand grasps the same branch, but doesn't stick to the self-identification because it's in right view. And like that right there, just like it's just produces clarity for me.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It is just a great metaphor, that stands the test of time. Eric, good to see you tonight. How you doing?
See everyone. For me, I think
I definitely still deal with a little bit of distraction when I'm meditating, and it's really me like the self-talk that I give, which would allow me to like get that deeper level of concentration. Like if my self-talk is, I don't know, like if I find myself just talking in my head, and like I find that I'm more distracted, then I'm able to just like let it go,
Yeah.
just like focus. I don't know.
No, you're right. Thank you, Eric. And every one of us can, identify with that, can't you? With that self-talk that's always distracting. That really is,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's really the ultimate release is from that self-talk, isn't it? And having a mind that is at one point uncontrolled. In the Vitakka Sutta, the Buddha says we gain the ability to think what we want to think when we want to think it, meaning in all situations it's appropriate. And just like this sutta, recognizing the different levels of absorption, it's just as important to recognize when our minds are distracted.
I think the connection when he was talking about the waste pool being closed, the inlet closed, and then the outlet open, but nothing coming in to flush it out. I thought of a mind that's closed on one end or the other end, and nothing flows. Like when I started letting my thoughts flow and come back to the breath, it became an open. Just became open.
Yeah, wow.
There was nothing that got stuck anymore. Nothing stuck. It just kept going.
Rather than trying to stop your thoughts, which you can't do, you're just not distracted by them anymore. Again, and that relates directly to these deepening levels of jhana, of meditative absorption. It's impossible to stop thinking, although and I've said this a few times, I could all give you a technique right now, and in a few minutes, you would all be in a trance-like state. Why would I or anybody else want to do that to another human being, for that matter? There's no value in it.
Each factor is self-supporting. People have. I mean,
Yep.
Sometimes we go one by one, but it really is incorporated, and without total incorporation, it's not possible to enter into that fourth jhana. It's not possible. So you often hear a right view, begin with right view, and you really end with right view.
Yep. Yeah, you could say that initial right view is just a view that I don't know everything. There's something missing. And that develops through the Eightfold Path to profound right view, which the Buddha described as a profound understanding of the nature of suffering. And knowing its origination, knowing its cessation, and knowing the path leading to this. That's right view. It's all part of it. And if you leave any aspect of this out, it doesn't work.
You can't check it off and move on.
Yeah.
Part of
I
your
can't
life.
say I'm going to do 7.
Yeah.
Well, I heard
But
it.
I'm not going to do that 8th one that I don't.
I heard it said that they're all team players.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good analogy too.
It is.
You
Yeah.
can't go on vacation and set aside 4 of them.
Yeah, you
You
can.
can't venture.
I mean-
You gotta play.
You might, but you want to run? You want me to do meta right real
I
quick?
don't want to interrupt, but you guys-
No, I think we're done, right? Let's finish with
You're all
meta.
enjoying joyful engagement.
Yeah, we'll finish with meta. I can't think of any important announcements. So again, find your relaxed meditation posture and take a moment to become mindful of your in-breath and your out-breath. And these are the Buddha's words on metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class tonight. Peace.
Have a great week.
You too.